Hi, everybody. This is Paul Hitchcock. I'm the founder and president of Giant Jacks Media. We're headquartered here in Orange County, California. This is my channel, Giant TV, where I have entrepreneurs doing amazing things. And certainly the father-daughter duo here are two of the people that fit that bill, Dave Alden and his daughter, Lissy. Welcome, both of you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
and
having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Lissy, you're the founder of Mindy, a mental and organizational fitness company. And Dave, obviously, you're a Vistage share. We've known each other for a while, doing incredible things there with building and managing your group. And so we're going to get into this because we're talking today, the title Winning the Day, Employee Retention. Let's get into it. Lissy, you
Great.
want to
Well,
go? Or Dave?
let me just jump in here a little bit because let me just address the father-daughter thing, right? So we're both in we're both in a space where we bring together people and peer advisory groups to help each other in different ways, and but
Hmm.
we approach it a little bit differently too. So, my general theme is what keeps business owners and CEOs up at night. So that's kind of the problem. But then what's the solution? And it turns out that Lissy and her business has solutions. And so, what a great father daughter yin yang kind of situation that we're able to bring to Giant TV. And
I
so,
love it.
yeah, so I want to dive in with a little bit to List because what is the number one issue that my Vistage members across the mid market space are dealing with? And it's hiring, retaining, onboarding top talent, right? And so, how do you do that? It's not easy. And so, Liz, I want to talk a little bit about what you specialize in is mental fitness and organizational fitness. And how do they relate to that?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dad. That was awesome. Really, really excited to be here with you both today. And thanks for teeing that up. I always talk about organizational fitness whenever there's a question that comes up specifically around retention, primarily because organizational fitness is something that most people haven't heard about. And I'll just define it for us here. It's really about making sure that an organization builds the right structures, training, and tools to grow well and fast over time. And we use the word fitness specifically because fitness really helps us visualize that this action or these sets of actions that need to be enacted by leadership and the entire company are ones that have to be done repetitively over and over and over again in order to create strength within the organization so that you can keep employees and also attract them. And so I'll kind of talk through the four elements for at a very high level for organizational fitness, and then we can kind of dive into those if they're interesting. We can kind of go in another direction, but there's really four things that every organization needs to be managing for. The first has to do with clear expectations. And this is not just around expectations for what your employees need to do, but it's actually also for how employees need to show up in the terms of values and the cultural expectations you have for any one employee.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of folks think, well, my expectations are clear. If we run, for example, a financial firm and we do auditing, the goal is auditing. But the real truth is, most people are hired, fired, or leave specifically because they don't feel good at work daily. And they're not necessarily sure about how their behaviors are linking to that big picture. And so that's where expectations come in. The second three categories I'll kind of buzz through really quickly. The second is foundations for doing your job, which are really around pay, safety, breaks, regular progress check ins, making sure that you have this general hygiene around making sure your employees are supported to do the job that you've asked them to do. The third thing is around creating elements for progress or building a learning organization. This is everything from making sure that you're managing workload, growth opportunities, fostering warm connections amongst employees, even in a remote environment, and also making sure that you're enacting what's called skills based work. So people are able to do jobs that are aligned to their skill set as opposed to a job title. But the last most important piece of all of this, after expectations, is around the fourth category, which is communication and accountability, which is, I joke, the invisible secret sauce, the magic that's typically missing from most organizations. And it's usually the thing that leads to most people leaving, is that they are not clear on expectations, or they are clear on expectations, but then there is not regular and ongoing communication and accountability amongst themselves, colleagues, their bosses for those expectations. And all of a sudden they feel like they can't possibly win, right? And so we can
Yeah.
talk about examples of that. But those are really your four categories: expectations, foundations, elements for progress, and communication and accountability.
I love it. I love the parallel to fitness, right? So you go to the gym, you got a plan, right? You need a plan. And so then you're going to measure that plan and you're going to do some different things to make all that work. So I love that story, how you frame it
Yeah.
as a bit of fitness too. And so I see, sorry, so many organizations have elements of that, but they don't quite have the machine to make these all come together. So, Liz, what do you see in terms of you need all four of these in parallel? You need them to happen at the same time. What are your thoughts on how this kind of works? If I'm a business owner, how do I start? What do I got to do?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And there's kind of two frames that I look at this in. The first is, what are the tools that you are using to manage your organization? Now, I'm going to say a word here that's about to trigger everybody. So, just a warning, meetings are actually an incredible, powerful management science tool that are meant
Hate
to
them.
help
Hate them.
align. Hate them. Everybody said, I hate meetings, no more. The problem is that meetings, like any tool that's overused, haven't been used in the right way. And so taking a look at how you're currently managing these things matters. And a huge part of them are meeting structure. You're looking at the values you put on the walls, your performance reviews, right? How you're setting expectations in terms of goals. So understanding that these four things are happening at your organization, whether you like them or not, poorly or typically weekly, matters. The
Well,
second
listen,
thing
quick,
is,
quick question. Are you
oh,
talking about
please,
one-to-one meetings in it, or like
good
a
question.
team meetings, or?
Your entire meeting cadence within an organization
Hmm.
is part of how expectations are getting set and or reinforced. Same thing with communication. Now, I always like to say I have a tool that helps people understand what are the elements that we are doing really well at in mental or organizational fitness, and what are the elements that we need to work on. Now, you don't need to work on all four things, Dad, to answer your question very specifically. It's that you basically need to pick one. And you can either go to a couple employees and ask them, of these four things, what are we doing best? What could we use the most work on? Or I bet in your soul, if you sat in silence for a moment without your cell phone in front of you, you'd be able to say, hey, you know what, we could do a better job at expectations, or we could do a better job at foundations, meaning all I do is communicate, but people aren't necessarily, doing the one-on-ones with their bosses that they need to follow through. Now, like physical fitness, you can't go to the gym and work on your biceps, triceps, quads, and cardio at the same time. You're usually focused on one big thing at a time. And then in being at the gym, you're working on other stuff. The same is true with org fitness. I usually go into an organization, do a quick diagnostic, and then say, okay, let's actually focus on expectations first. Because if expectations aren't clear, we could have people running all over the board, but it doesn't
Oh yeah.
actually matter. And so once we look at expectations, we say, oh, goals are clear. Those are on the wall. Those are being sent out every week. People are asked to report on them. But now we need to actually hold everyone accountable in terms of behaviors. What structures need to be in place to do that?
Liz, I got to tell you that the org part comes pretty naturally to me just from my history in organizations. The one I want to flip the switch on a little bit is the mental fitness piece, because I like that because it's a lot to do with accountability for that individual. So it's just not what the corporation is doing or the organization's doing for me. It's what am I doing for myself, which reflects positively on the organization. So I would tell you years ago, mental fitness was kind of like a woo-woo concept, and
Yeah.
for the older generation, right? But today, it's really real. So, kind of, can you pull that together for us? And how does that mental fitness work with the organizational fitness for the overall benefit of everybody involved?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I get it a lot because folks come to me, they're complaining about work and they're like, well, if we just fixed my boss or if I was just clear on what I needed to do, everything would go great. And that's actually not true. I always say that I started my work in organizational fitness thinking I was solving the hard problem, which is if you fix the structure of a company, make sure the right people are in the right place at the right time and getting supported and appreciated for that work, everything was all good. But that's actually not true. The problem and stress started to be expressed through home or through health or through marriage or politics instead. And so that's when I started looking at mental fitness. Now, mental fitness, for those who don't know, is really about the ability to tackle your goals and day with vigor, energy, and consistency. again, to tackle your goals and day with vigor, energy, and consistency. And no matter where you work, no matter how wonderful their resources are, no matter how careful they're staffing, the floor to make sure that your workload is managed, no matter how great expectations are, if you're on your cell phone 24/7 and you're not taking care of your mental state, nothing else works. And so mental fitness is a practice of exercises, things like recovery exercises, like making sure that you rest your mind through mindfulness or meditation, or simply not bringing your phone to the toilet. Things like cross training your brain, making sure that you're
Impossible.
learning.
Impossible.
Impossible, right? Things like cross training your brain, making sure you're learning new things every day and keeping or building what I call cognitive flexibility in your mind. So you don't get stuck in these mental ruts, which happens when you're tired because your brain will try to conserve energy and you use patterns. Or scoring, which is making and recognizing progress. You will be in a place where no matter how great your environment, you're going to have to leave. And so I always like to say that org fitness is really about the structure you're in. Mental fitness is about the work that you're doing to live and exist within that structure. And at the crux of both of those things, if it's a Venn diagram, you're looking at high performance or goal achievement in the middle. And so if you think about this in terms of athletics, because we love these analogies, your team can be beautifully structured with great practices. But if you personally show up to practice and you're doing all the right things, but then you go home and you're eating Cheetos nonstop, sitting watching Netflix while you're double screening and not sleeping, you're not going to be able to perform on that team for very long. And so this is where you understanding your responsibility for taking care of your own mind, especially in knowledge work, where your brain is your number one asset. Knowledge work meaning any job where you have to use your brain on a daily basis, which is most jobs today.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it becomes very clear that there may be a reason, yes, why work feels not so good today, but the entire reason may not be because you're in the wrong environment. It might also be because you're not doing the right things to feel good in that environment.
It's interesting that, I go to the gym from time to time. And so I see that so many people have trainers. And because people can't know themselves all the different tools that are out there. And so this is where you and I share one thing. We do coaching. We do it in a
Yeah.
little different way. And
Yep.
so the mental fitness coach, how does that work? I mean, you go to the gym, there's a million machines. How many machines are there in the mental fitness world? And so how many tools do you have? And kind of, it's complicated. Just kind of simplify. What tools you got out there to make all this work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and I love the analogy of walking to the gym and seeing all of these different machines. So, the work that I really work to do with people is help them, one, understand at a very fundamental level the mind movements their brain needs to feel good. So, most people who walk into a gym know that you need to move generally, push, pull, get your heart rate up, sweat a little bit, maybe pump your muscles. We don't have a mental model for that in your brain. And I always say that the whole point of mental fitness is to build strength in your mind. Strength meaning you can endure through hard things. Flexibility, which is to see other perspectives, which allows you power in a situation to kind of essentially see things in a new way and therefore behave a new way. And then endurance, meaning last for long periods of time. And so the machines, the quote unquote machines that I teach people how to use, or the workouts that I teach people how to use, are really related to those three functional needs, depending on what my individual client is looking to build. Now, when it comes to the kinds of tools that you need to practice mental fitness or the exercises you might be doing to build, for example, a focus routine, a big part of what we start doing is practicing what I say as intentionality. Most of my clients struggle with focus, which is the practice of setting your intention. And so a big part of what we do is every day they're setting up their 3 priorities against their 3 monthly priorities, and then relentlessly checking in, did they do the thing they said they were going to do, to start to create that cognitive feedback loop and strength to start saying no to the things that are not on that list. So depending on your goals, right? That's how we kind of change your routine, and that's how we switch it up. And the number one thing missing in the mental fitness space for anybody is tangible progress. Your brain sits behind your eyes. We forget it's there. And then by the time you feel better, you forget about the things that got you feeling good. And so we are all on this, what I call mental wellness roller coaster. And so the value of potentially having a coach or finding a way to quantify or visualize your practice in any way, shape, or form is in starting to make sure that your brain can really recognize the wins that you're gaining when you're doing these positive things for your mind.
I have a question on that, if you
Right.
don't mind, Dave. Could I follow on
Abs-
that?
Absolutely.
Because this is interesting to me. Because when you talk about organizational fitness, that's business stuff, makes sense. When you start talking about mental fitness, how does it not get into a personal nature with somebody? Because there's such a focus today on mental health, right? And mental fitness. Is there a crossover there? And do you got to kind of walk gingerly with that? And people bring up personal stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Absolutely, people bring up personal stuff, but I always like to say that humans don't get to leave their humanity at the door when they walk into a corporate setting with a suit on. They've always been that person. They were always bringing in the difficult moment they had with the kid who wouldn't eat in the morning or get off to school. They were always bringing, the issues that they were having with a relationship, or, their bad mood because they didn't wake up on time to go to the gym. What I will say is the difference between kind of mental health and mental fitness is really about this idea that the challenges to your mental wellness that most people face that I work with in the workplace are things that cause stress, exhaustion, overwhelm, burnout that are technically non medical, that are caused by non medical issues. Now, when those issues, those challenges to your wellness become sustained over time, that's where we start heading into episodic depression, anxiety, little t trauma or big T trauma. Traumas is defined as any sort of experience that triggers a stress response, right? Um, all of a sudden you're dealing with a mental health issue, and this is where a lot of times we get scared of bringing personal into work. Like, I'm about to work with
Yeah.
a group of clinicians, and they feel like it's vulnerable to share that they're stressed. There's not a single person in the world who's high performing who doesn't use stress. There's a good stress, use stress, and distress, bad stress. But I'm here to talk about challenges to their wellness. Now, again, I always like to say, in the same way, if you went to the gym day after day and you were jumping on your ankle and you said, ow, 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 I can't do that, you'd go to the doctor and say, hey, I think there's something wrong with my ankle. Most people don't realize the same thing is happening in our brains. If we're trying to think positively and we can't, over time, all of a sudden, that's where we start to go talk to a therapist, because we might be in an episode of depression. Or we may find we can't focus, right? Which is happening to a lot of people now. And they say, I actually am I'm doing these practices, it's not helping, or I can't do these practices because of, and that's when we might go into the mental health space. So this is where a lot of the conversation around mental health matters, but we get scared. But we just have to be careful that when something repetitively is we are experiencing over time that's causing us discomfort or getting in the way of our ability to achieve our goals, that's when this tends to be more of a mental health issue. And I always say you don't deal with that at work, but you might deal with that with work's resources, right? That they have available for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me bring this if I can, and tell me if this makes sense to you. Mental fitness. Let's use the term EQ, emotional intelligence, which great leaders have to demonstrate. And so when you think about optimism, when you think about uh, being able to solve problems, being curious, understanding the problem before you focus on what the solutions are. And so all those pieces underline mental fitness underscores those things, I believe. And so I spend a lot of time with my Vistage members and coaching on terms of EQ, but that mental fitness can really give you the muscle to be able to be at your best every day and demonstrating the EQ that your staffs, employees, and your organization can appreciate. Does that kind of dovetail with this conversation?
Yes, because I always like to say if you're not practicing mental fitness, then you don't have the cognitive energy to listen, which takes more energy than speaking, which is one of the crux of emotional intelligence and being able to read the room and truly pay attention to the emotional state of others. And so being able to practice mental fitness is the thing that allows you to perform at a high level against, your emotional quotient, but also your intellectual quotient and absolutely everything else. So very, very well called out. And yes, they go hand in hand, and you can't do one without the other.
Good. Paul, how are we doing on time? Because I know both Liz and I, we do all day sessions, right? We don't have all day. So
No, I love it.
you're the
Yeah,
timekeeper.
yeah, I'd say a couple last things here as we hit the wall. I had a question is as um, both of you are involved with these leaders, do in management, do they openly come to the table with issues like when you're first working with them? And both of you could answer this, but or you have to pull stuff out of them.
Let me go first here because the
Please.
people that generally join peer advisory groups generally have three characteristics. They are self aware, they're learners, and
Ah,
generally have something keeping them up at night. That's where I get that theme, keeping
yeah,
them up at night. So that isn't the general population, to be quite candid with you. And just in general, I got talked to probably 6 or 7 business owners, business leaders, because people don't dedicate the time, don't see the benefit of, and don't be honest with you, it's not always the reason, don't practice that mental fitness piece because to be a bit self-aware, you're doing some of the things that Lissy's talking about, I
yeah, for
believe.
sure,
Maybe
for
not in a
sure.
regiment. It's kind of like you don't go to the gym, but at home maybe you're doing push-ups in the morning, you're doing your stretching, but you're not doing the whole routine kind of deal. So that's how I see it. Liz, how about from your side?
Really, really well said. I think from my side, what I find is that my one-to-one clients, similar to my dad, they have this sense of, self-awareness and learning, and they're really willing to have the conversations, even if they're not bringing the initial, facts to the table that we end up discussing. But I do find with my consulting and workshop clients, it usually takes a bit more time for folks who either have an extensive amount of expertise and they're expected to be an expert in their
Yeah,
field, or a certain amount of tenure within an organization to come to me and have these conversations. So there is a lag, I find, a bit generationally, and then like I said, just from an expertise perspective, because mental fitness, even though it sounds like what it is, I mean, every single professional athlete in the world is practicing mental performance as a part of their being the best at what they do. But most people haven't been taught that we need to do the same thing in other parts of our life. And so it feels vulnerable to them to have these conversations at first. And then they realize, wow, it's actually not, we don't need to be talking about my childhood to make sure that I'm feeling more focused at work every day. And once they
Yeah.
realize that, it becomes really powerful.
So here's a generational thing, Paul. I would tell you
yeah.
that from my generation perspective, certainly working for an enterprise for the majority of my career, vulnerability was weakness.
Oh,
You were
right.
expected to know everything
Yeah.
all the time. And I think this that to the benefit of younger generations, Lissy's and others, is that people are much more open to the understanding about vulnerability. And it goes to learning and self awareness and mental fitness.
Yeah, I think it goes into the authenticity of today. I mean, leaders are just more authentic today, and
Yes.
I don't know, maybe it's because of everyone's online and doing things, but to me, the great leaders are authentic and out there, you know.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines, Lissy, you'll love this, is we used to say the beatings will continue till morale improves. And so I mean that's just an indication of kind of what the environment was like in the olden days.
Yeah, we won't talk about what it was like growing up around that, Lissy. We'll just leave that on the side
Yeah.
right now.
Can I ask one question? Actually, I am curious, and this is for both of you, which is who have you seen, and it could be someone you've personally experienced or a leader in like the mass media, demonstrate great leadership in terms of this vulnerability today?
Dave, I'm
Oh,
going to
I
let
would
you
tell
handle that. Yeah.
Oh, I would tell you, there's no question, Alan Mulally at Ford Motor Company. And I've had personal experience with his leadership. And being vulnerable is one of the reasons he was such an authentic leader, using Paul's words. And that
Yeah.
was very refreshing.
Love it.
Love
Great
it.
stuff. I know we could go on forever. Appreciate this. Lissy, David, thank you. And everyone listening here, wherever you're watching this, because we are going to simulcast this everywhere. Contact information for both these folks will be around this video. And thanks for being here.
Paul, thank
Thank
you
you.
for letting us be on Giant TV.
Giant TV. Thank you. Thank you both. I know we'll see you again soon.